Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled The United Nation of Yisra'el, Part 6, Understanding the Social Order of Unity within the Renewed Nation of Yisra'el. The podcast objectives are reveal how we are becoming a united nation, analyze the requirements for the Good Shepherd, reveal the danger of false doctrine and false prophets, and reveal the social order for exposing false doctrine. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. By knowledge and understanding, we are united. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome back to our Word from a Watchman series. In our most recent lesson, we executed a deep dive into Jeremiah 3:14 through 15, where we came to see how Yahuwah is only saving one from a city and two from a clan in these last days. And although this ratio constitutes a spiritual average, the focal premise is sure. Vis-a-vis, the renewed nation of Israel was never intended to be a large body. Here is why. You cannot be in the renewed nation of Israel if you don't love Elohim. Now, that was the inflection. Here is the problem. To wit, the vast majority of men and women in this nation have never truly loved Elohim. And trust me, it's even worse than it sounds. Get this. There are 7 major tests of love in our quest, and the majority within this nation have never passed the first test, and thus they are ignorant to all the rest. As I say, this is a huge problem, for where there is ignorance, there can be no knowledge. And where there is no knowledge, the people perish, for they are without excuse. Here is why. Like all the degrees of lawlessness, ignorance is a self-wound. To wit, the ones who become ignorant did it to themselves. Now, this speaks to a key revelation, which I have shared with you twice before, and yet, seeing as it is germane to the lesson for today, I will share it with you again at this time. Consider this, my friends, and remember, while ignorance causes you to disregard the truth. Deception works in the background to change the reality of truth. Ergo, the next time you turn around to see the truth you once ignored, you won't see it, for the reality of truth has been altered. Ergo, the only truth you will see is an ulterior version, modified and falsified by Satan. And the only truth you will know will be his reality. And this, my friends, is why they are without excuse. For look, listen, it has been written, when they knew Elohim, they did not esteem him as Elohim, and their undiscerning heart was darkened. To wit, because they chose to be ignorant to retain their lives, they became ignorant unto death and without choice, for they refused to esteem him as Elohim. And where there is no esteem, there can be no love. Notwithstanding, there remains the remnant, a spiritual nation, a set apart people who are not infected with ignorance, for the simple but sure fact that we love Elohim. For unlike the false Hebrews in our midst, we are walking in obedient faith to his word, and we are guarding all of his commands. For look, listen, it has been written, for this is the love for Elohim, that we guard his commands. Hallelujah. Now, that speaks to the solution. But here is the problem. The majority of the leaders in this nation are not guarding the commands of Elohim, which is why they are all ignorant and being deceived. And if you let them, they will deceive you too. This is why Yahuwah did not end Jeremiah 3:14-15 with a depressing reality that could have easily been worse. Quite the contrary, for he is intent on not losing one member of the remnant, which is why he promised to give us shepherds according to his heart. And unlike the incompetent leaders in the dying nation of Israel, these good shepherds are feeding us with knowledge and understanding. And it is by this knowledge and understanding that we are becoming a united nation. Praise Yah. Now, that said, we must hasten the process of unification, for time is of the essence, my friends, always of the essence. Not only this, but the day of salvation is coming to an end. And seeing as there is no other way for us to survive, we must continue our quest to be unified. Let's get started. A shortage of good shepherds. Now, as we continue in our pursuit of unity, I want to reiterate the vast importance of the few good shepherds Yahuwah has raised up in these last days. Trust me, a good shepherd who is on one accord with the heart of Elohim and possesses knowledge and understanding is very hard to find. And for the record, I will say it again, a good shepherd is even harder to find than an honest man. That said, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: how do you find a good shepherd, seeing as he is harder to find than an honest man? The answer is sure, and there are many layers involved, and each layer is associated with one of the 7 major milestones in our quest. For each milestone represents a point of mastery with regards to ministry. Now, as you know, the fear of Elohim is the first of these 7 milestones. Ergo, by strict spiritual and scriptural definition. Every good shepherd, i.e., pastor, elder, etc., must be walking in the fear of Elohim. Now, here again, this is only the first of the 7 primary requirements. To wit, the fear of Elohim is the most basic test for any man or woman who assumes an office at the top of the hierarchy of obedience. Along these lines, every good shepherd should be reigning over the 16 degrees at the foundation of lawlessness, which you see to the right. That said, feel free to pause the video and observe these 16 degrees. Now, I want you to consider all the shepherds and leaders that you know in this nation and ask yourself the following question. Are these men and women operating in any of the degrees to the right? Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, more than half of the shepherds in this nation are disqualified for disobedience alone. You should also consider dishonesty, unrighteousness, immorality, and above all, prejudice. Here is why. Due to the integration of lawlessness, anyone who is operating in disobedience and prejudice is operating in every degree at the foundation of lawlessness. This is why I can confidently declare that the majority of the shepherds in this nation are not good shepherds. And this is another reason why the majority in our nation are dying. And again, it is why Yahuwah is only saving 1 from a city and 2 from a clan. My dear friends, remember what the master said. The people will only get the leaders they deserve. Ergo, if you are operating in any of the degrees you see to the right, expect the same from your leaders. You deserve them, and they deserve you. And thus, we conclude the shortage of good shepherds should not be contrasted only against the bad shepherds. For you can only lead someone who is willing to follow. And the majority of the people are no better. The power to deceive and to kill. Now, that said, you must keep in mind that we have only analyzed the first of the 7 primary requirements upon the Good Shepherd, and we have already eliminated a good majority of the leaders in this nation. Here is why this is so crucial. Any leader who fails the first requirement cannot possibly feed you with knowledge. At best, all they can give you is information, and most of it will not be true. And this, my friends, is one of many reasons why many parishioners are abandoning their assemblies. It is because their leaders are spiritually inept, and as they are void of knowledge and understanding, their parishioners are not being fed. And as we cannot survive without our daily bread, those who stay will end up dead. That said, the question of the hour is simply this. How do you find an assembly where you can be fed with knowledge as opposed to false doctrine? The answer is sure, and we analyzed it for the full duration of phase 1. Not only this, but we also touched on it in the most recent section. Vis-a-vis, you must walk daily in the fear of Elohim, for this allows you to operate with the girdle of truth. And the man or woman who operates with the girdle of truth cannot be led astray by false doctrine. Now, if you recall, This is the prime objective of my Word from a Watchman series. That is, to use the girdle of truth to purge our beliefs of all the errors and lies we inherited and all the errors and lies we acquired. Now, by fulfilling this objective, we will achieve two critical goals. A, we will see through all the false doctrines in our midst. And B, we will expose all the false prophets and the lawless ones who are following them. That said, you must remember how this exposition is Yahuwah's will, and it is the only way we will survive in these last days. For the deadliest weapon we are fighting is false doctrine. Ergo, our greatest threats are those who promote false doctrine. Here lies the inflection and the problem. To wit, false prophets come in all shapes and sizes, and thus I will provide a definition for a false prophet. A false prophet is anyone who leads others astray by their actions and or their words. Someone who attempts to teach others without spiritual authority. My dear friends, this definition makes one thing very clear. Our nation is filled with false prophets. Not only this, but there are more false prophets than there are bad shepherds, which is just one more reason why the majority in our nation are dying. Therefore, before you receive any word from anyone who claims to be a minister, I encourage you to ask them if they speak on behalf of Elohim and with his authority. And if they say no, you know you are dealing with a false prophet. For where there is no authority, one cannot speak on behalf of Elohim. And if they do, they are operating in the spirit of blasphemy, which is the one sin that will not be forgiven. Now, that said, you must remember that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. Ergo, the real issue is not the false prophet. Rather, it is their false doctrine. Here is why. On one hand, the false prophet is a primitive tool of Satan with the greater power to deceive. And on the other hand, false doctrine is a deadly weapon of an enemy with the greater power to kill. Here lies the inflection. Vis-a-vis, you can recover from deception, but you cannot recover from death. Ergo, as false doctrine is the primary driver of death within our nation, we must expose everyone, or the only unity we will have will be in our demise. The first rule of unity. Now, the process by which we expose false doctrine is contrary to human nature. To wit, the only way you can expose false doctrine is by not focusing on the false doctrine. Here is why. False doctrine is a blinding light. Ergo, the more you focus on it, the more you are blinded by it. That said, the manner in which we expose false doctrine is quite simply by focusing on the truth, conceptually, analytically, procedurally, and socially. Let's talk socially, beginning with the following treasure box. Yahushua Messiah is the standard for dealing with false prophets and false believers. To wit, he never argued with them on their level, for that would have validated their delusion. And thus, you will find our loving master constantly dropping truth and persistently speaking the word. Not only this, but you will also find that our master had one message for the multitudes and another for his disciples. For he had the spiritual discernment to distinguish those who had a heart and a mind for truth from those who were full of empty words. Matthew 13:10 through 15 is revealing. And the taught ones came and said to him, Yahushua Messiah, why do you speak to them in parables? And he answering said to them, because it has been given to you to know the secrets of the reign of the heavens, but to them it has not been given. I speak to them in parables because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And in them the prophecy is completely filled, which says, hearing you shall hear, and by no means understand, and seeing you shall see, and by no means perceive. For the heart of this people has become thickened, and their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. My dear friends, I submit to you that we are dealing with the same social elements in this day, a majority populace that cannot be saved. And thus, the first rule of unity is having the wisdom to understand who has the potential to be unified. For he who is winning souls must be wise. And if you are wise, you will not be blinded by false doctrine. For by the spirit of discernment, you will handle all the false Hebrews in our midst the same way our master did. To wit, you will not stoop down to their level. On the rather, you will force them to rise to yours. And this, my friends, is how they will be exposed vis-a-vis. Instead of arguing over their delusions and darkness, you speak the truth and stay in the light. For light shines through the darkness, and the darkness cannot comprehend it. All you have to do is put on the girdle of truth and never take it off. For without the girdle of truth, you will fail to see the difference between the righteous and the wrong, between the one who serves Elohim and the one who does not serve him. Now, at a very high level, that is how you expose false doctrine per the social model. And yet, there are three other models which we will begin to touch on in the next podcast in this series. Yahuwah bless you until then. Now, here is the final word. The Spirit speaks expressly and is very clear, and yet they cannot see and they do not hear. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, there is a reason why the majority in our nation are filled with misconceptions, errors, confusion, denial, and delusion. And Yahushua tells us it is because they have closed their minds and their hearts to the truth, because there are parts of the truth they will not receive. And thus, they will wrestle with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth over the parts they refuse to believe. Heretofore, I recommend, if you are blessed to see the truth, don't mess around. For everyone who resists the truth is dying, and soon they will not be found. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson, and if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com, and I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, The United Nation of Yisra'el, Part 6. And the next podcast is entitled, End Times 534, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 4. I will post this podcast on Monday, November 10th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.